The moment you decide, something far deeper than effort is set into motion. The moment you decide, you stop asking, stop hoping, stop pleading, and begin occupying. You move from desire to possession, from waiting to being. And when you do that, reality has no option but to follow. Most people think life moves first, and then they react. They believe the world acts upon them, that events dictate their feelings, that circumstances decide their worth and direction. But the truth is reversed. Life is a mirror, obedient and precise, reflecting not what you want, but what you assume to be true. What you persist in feeling as real must externalize, because reality is not creating you. You are creating the experience of reality through the state you live in. When you decide something is yours, you are not trying to force it into existence. You are selecting a state and stepping into it. A state is simply a way of being, a set of assumptions, a mood, an inner posture toward life. Every possible experience already exists as a state. Wealth exists, health exists, love exists, confidence exists, peace exists. You do not create these things. You move into alignment with the state where they are natural. The decision is the doorway. The problem is not that people lack desire. The problem is that they refuse to decide. They linger in longing, thinking longing is powerful, but longing is confession of absence. Wanting is agreement with not having. Hoping is permission for delay. The world does not respond to words or wishes. It responds to identity. It responds to who you believe you are being right now. To decide something is yours is to accept it inwardly as a fact, even while the outer world appears unchanged. This is where most turn back. They look for evidence, for signs, for confirmation. But consciousness does not wait for evidence. It becomes the evidence. When you decide, you assume the feeling that would be natural if it were already true. Not excitement, not desperation, but quiet knowing. The calm certainty that this is done. Think of something you already possess. You do not affirm it all day. You do not check for proof. You do not fear losing it every moment. You simply know. That knowing is the creative power. That knowing is what you must cultivate toward what you desire. The feeling of ownership precedes the manifestation of ownership. When you decide inwardly, reality begins rearranging itself in ways you could never predict. People move. Opportunities appear. Delays dissolve. Conversations happen naturally. You are not pushing these events. They are flowing from the new state you occupy. Life is responding to your assumption, not your effort. There is no competition in this process. No one can take what is yours by assumption. No external force can block what you have accepted internally. Resistance only exists when you are divided within yourself, when part of you wants and another part doubts. Decision ends division. Decision unifies consciousness, and unified consciousness is irresistible. Do not confuse decision with strain. Strain is trying to convince yourself. Decision is settling the matter. It is saying inwardly, this is who I am now. This is what is true for me now, and then allowing yourself to relax into that truth. Relaxation is a sign of acceptance. Tension is a sign of disbelief. You do not need to visualize constantly. You do not need to repeat affirmations mechanically. You do not need to fight negative thoughts. All of these are secondary. The primary act is assumption. Once you decide, thoughts naturally begin to align. Inner conversations shift. Reactions soften. You start responding as the person who already has, not the one who hopes. Observe your inner dialogue. That is the true cause of everything you experience. When you change the inner conversation, the outer conversation must follow. When you hear yourself inwardly speaking from fulfillment instead of lack, you are already living in the end, and the end is the cause. You may ask, what if the world contradicts my decision? Understand this clearly. The outer world is always a past echo. It is showing you what you previously assumed. Do not argue with it. Do not react emotionally to it. Simply persist in the new assumption. Reaction gives life to the old state. Indifference starves it. Calm persistence replaces it. Faith is not belief without doubt. Faith is loyalty to an assumption despite appearances. It is remaining faithful to the inner decision even when the senses protest. The senses are not creative, they are interpretive. Consciousness alone creates. When you decide something is yours, you are not claiming it arrogantly. You are aligning with a version of yourself for whom it is normal. That version of you already exists. You are simply choosing to be them now. Time collapses when identity changes. You will notice subtle shifts first. Your reactions change. Your expectations soften. You feel less urgency, less need to prove, less anxiety. These are signs that the decision has been accepted. Then external changes follow, sometimes suddenly, sometimes gradually, always precisely. Do not dictate the path. The how is not your responsibility. The moment you try to control the process, you step out of the state and back into effort. Your role is to remain in the feeling of ownership. Let life handle the mechanics. There is nothing mystical about this. It is a law as exact as gravity. Assumption hardens into fact. Consciousness objectifies itself. What you consistently feel to be true becomes visible. The only question is, what are you deciding to be true about yourself? If you decide you are chosen, life treats you as chosen. If you decide you are overlooked, life confirms that too. If you decide you are supported, support appears. If you decide you are alone, solitude surrounds you. The world is innocent. It reflects without judgment. Decision is the greatest act of self-respect. It is saying, I trust my inner authority more than appearances. It is choosing self-definition over circumstance definition. And when you do that, you reclaim your creative power. Do not wait for permission. Do not wait for readiness. Do not wait for confidence. Decide first, and confidence follows. Decide first, and readiness organizes itself. Decide first, and permission becomes irrelevant. You were never meant to chase life. You were meant to select a state and allow life to meet you there. The moment you decide, the chase ends. You stop running after outcomes and start attracting reflections. Let the decision be final. Not dramatic, not loud, not emotional, final. Like closing a door gently but firmly. From that moment onward, refuse to entertain inner conversations that deny your choice, not with force, but with preference. You simply return to the knowing. And one day, often when you least expect it, you will notice that the world has rearranged itself around your assumption. What once felt distant feels natural. What once felt impossible feels obvious. And you will realize that nothing moved until you did, inwardly, decide it is yours and see reality move. Not because you demanded it, but because you became the one for whom it was already true. And as you remain in that decision, something profound begins to happen beneath the surface of your awareness. The mind stops oscillating between hope and fear. The heart stops bargaining with life. You no longer wake up measuring your worth by yesterday's results or today's circumstances. Instead, you begin each moment from a settled center, an inner knowing that does not need reassurance. This knowing is not loud, it is steady. It does not rush, it waits without tension. It is the silent agreement you have made with yourself about who you are and what is true. This is where true power lives. Not in effort, not in intensity, not in constant mental repetition, but in inner stillness. Stillness is not passivity, it is certainty without struggle. When you decide something is yours and remain inwardly still about it, you remove resistance. And resistance is the only thing that ever delays the appearance of what is already accepted within. Notice how effortlessly life responds when you assume something negative without question. A single careless assumption can produce results without effort, without planning, without intention. This alone should reveal the law at work. The same mechanism that produces unwanted outcomes will produce desired ones when consciously directed. The difference is not in the law, the difference is in awareness. Most people unknowingly decide against themselves every day. They decide they are unlucky. They decide things take time. They decide others have it easier. They decide they must struggle. These decisions feel harmless because they are familiar, but familiarity does not equal truth. Every assumption, whether chosen or unconscious, is a seed, and every seed must grow into its likeness. When you consciously decide in your favor, you are not fighting destiny, you are selecting it. Destiny is not fixed, it is fluid, responding moment by moment to the identity you inhabit. The future is not ahead of you, it is within you, waiting for acceptance. You do not need to understand every detail of this process. Understanding is not what moves reality. Acceptance does. A child does not understand electricity, yet benefits from its power by using it. In the same way, you do not need to analyze consciousness, you need to live from it. Live from the end by letting your reactions reveal your decision. When something unexpected happens, ask yourself quietly, how would I respond if my desire were already fulfilled? Then respond from that place. Not to manipulate the situation, but to remain loyal to the state you have chosen. Loyalty to a state is what keeps it alive. You may notice moments where old thoughts return, where doubt tries to reassert itself. Do not panic. Doubt is simply habit, a leftover echo of a previous identity. Habits fade when they are no longer fed with attention. You do not argue with doubt. You outgrow it by remaining faithful to your decision. There is a dignity that emerges when you decide. You stop explaining yourself. You stop justifying your desires. You stop needing others to agree. Your inner world becomes private, sovereign, protected. And from that sovereignty, reality rearranges itself with surprising speed. Do not confuse speed with urgency. Urgency implies lack. Speed is a byproduct of clarity. When the decision is clear, life responds efficiently. When the decision is mixed, life mirrors the confusion. Clarity is kindness to yourself and to reality. As you persist, you may find that what you thought you wanted begins to feel natural long before it appears. This is a sign you have truly accepted it. Desire transforms into expectancy, and expectancy into calm familiarity. This inner shift is the manifestation beginning. The outer appearance is merely the final echo. And remember this, you are not changing the world. You are changing your position within it. The world you experience is filtered through your assumptions. Change the filter, and the scene must change. This is why effort in the outer world often fails. It tries to rearrange reflections without changing the source. The source is always the self-concept. Who you assume yourself to be determines what you allow, expect, and receive. When you decide something is yours, you are declaring that it is consistent with who you are. Reality cannot contradict self-concept indefinitely. It must conform. Stay why. The decision gently. Let it become familiar. Let it become boring. When something feels ordinary inwardly, it is on the verge of appearing outwardly. The extraordinary always enters life disguised as the natural. And so you continue, not watching the clock, not scanning the horizon, not asking when, but living from the settled conviction that what you have decided is already established, even as the world quietly reorganizes itself around that unseen but undeniable truth. And in that quiet persistence, you begin to notice how deeply conditioned the mind has been to wait for permission. It was trained to believe that evidence must come first, that validation must precede confidence, that success must arrive before identity can change. Yet the law works in the opposite direction. Identity moves first. Decision moves first. The inner shift always precedes the outer confirmation. You may observe moments where nothing seems to be happening, where days look ordinary, where circumstances appear stubbornly unchanged. This is not failure, this is incubation. Every assumption requires a gestation period, not because reality is slow, but because consciousness is reorganizing itself into consistency. When the inner world stabilizes, the outer world must follow without resistance. This is why impatience is the enemy of fulfillment. Impatience secretly says, "It is not mine yet." But the one who truly owns something is not in a hurry. They are at ease. They know it will reveal itself in the appropriate way at the appropriate moment. Ease is a powerful indicator of belief. As you remain loyal to your decision, your behavior begins to shift naturally. You choose differently without forcing yourself. You speak differently without rehearsing. You walk differently without trying. These are not techniques, they are symptoms of a new state. And states express themselves effort.
Leslie.
Be aware of how you speak about your life when no one is listening. The private narrative is the creative script. Public words mean little compared to inner conversations repeated in solitude. When you decide something is yours, those inner conversations soften. They no longer argue with life, they agree with it. You will also notice that certain desires begin to fall away. This is not loss, it is refinement. When you step into a higher assumption, smaller cravings dissolve because they no longer match who you are being. Desire always belongs to the state you occupy. Change the state, and desire evolves. Let this reassure you, you do not need to protect your decision from the world. The world has no power over a settled assumption. What needs protection is your attention. Where attention goes, life flows. Keep attention on the feeling of ownership, not on the mechanics of manifestation. There will be moments when the old story attempts to reclaim its place. Memories, emotions, past disappointments. Let them pass like weather. They are not enemies, they are echoes. You do not need to relive them to release them. Indifference is release. The more natural your decision feels, the faster the outer shift occurs. Naturalness is the bridge between inner acceptance and outer expression. When something feels forced, it is not yet accepted. When it feels normal, it is already impressed upon reality. You are not here to struggle with life. You are here to select experiences. Selection is subtle. It is an inner leaning, a quiet preference, a gentle but firm decision about what is true for you. Once selected, the experience unfolds through channels you did not plan. This is why comparison dissolves when you decide. You stop measuring your progress against others because you understand that each person is living from a different assumption. Their timeline has nothing to do with yours. Your only task is fidelity to your chosen state. The moment you truly accept something as yours, fear loses its grip. Fear only exists where there is uncertainty. Decision eliminates uncertainty. Even if the path is unclear, the destination feels settled, and a settled destination organizes the path. Remain aware of this. You are always deciding, even when you think you are not. Every reaction is a decision. Every expectation is a decision. Every repeated thought is a decision. Conscious creation begins when you decide deliberately instead of habitually. As this awareness deepens, life feels less like a battle and more like a dialogue. You listen inwardly, decide inwardly, and watch outwardly as the echo returns. There is no force involved, only alignment. And so you continue, not concluding, not finalizing, not sealing anything with drama, but remaining inside the living decision, allowing it to deepen, stabilize, and quietly reshape every layer of experience as the world continues to rearrange itself in response to the assumption you now live from. And within this living decision, you begin to sense a subtle shift in how time is experienced. Time no longer feels like something you are racing against or waiting upon. It becomes neutral, almost irrelevant. When you are no longer using time as proof of lack, it loses its power to disturb you. The one who has decided is not counting days, they are occupying being, and being is always now. You may notice that emotional reactions soften. Situations that once triggered anxiety or frustration no longer hook you in the same way. This is not because you are suppressing emotion, but because the identity from which those emotions arose has loosened its grip. Reactions belong to states. Change the state, and reactions reorganize themselves. There is a quiet confidence that emerges when you stop negotiating with life. Negotiation implies uncertainty. Decision implies authority. This authority is not dominance over others, it is alignment within yourself. When inner authority is established, outer chaos diminishes without effort. You are not required to constantly feel positive. Feelings rise and fall naturally. What matters is not emotional perfection, but directional loyalty. Even on days when energy feels low, the decision remains untouched. It sits beneath the surface, unchanged by temporary moods. This is why persistence is not about intensity, but continuity. Watch how your expectations begin to influence what you notice. When you decide something is yours, your awareness naturally scans for confirmation rather than contradiction. This is not selective blindness, it is selective resonance. You begin to notice opportunities, ideas, and connections that were always present but previously invisible to your former state. Life does not suddenly create new possibilities. It reveals what matches your assumption. The field was always full. Your decision tunes your perception to a specific frequency, and perception shapes experience. There may be moments where reality seems to test your decision, presenting situations that appear opposite to what you have assumed. These moments are not punishment, they are invitations to remain faithful. A test only exists to confirm stability. If the decision wavers, the echo lingers. If the decision remains calm, the contradiction dissolves. Understand this deeply. You do not need to defend your assumption. Defense implies threat. Your assumption is not fragile. It is sustained by consciousness itself. The moment you stop explaining and start embodying, the explanation becomes unnecessary. As your inner world stabilizes, your desires no longer feel heavy. They feel light, almost already resolved. This lightness is a sign that attachment has transformed into acceptance. Attachment says, I need this to feel whole. Acceptance says, this is consistent with who I am. Wholeness is not something you reach, it is something you remember. When you decide from wholeness, creation becomes effortless. You are no longer trying to fill a void, you are expressing a state. You will notice that silence becomes more comfortable. You no longer feel the need to constantly think about your desire. Silence is not forgetting, it is trust. The seed does not need to be dug up to grow. It grows because it has been planted. And so the decision lives quietly within you, influencing choices, shaping perceptions, dissolving resistance, and allowing reality to reorganize itself in ways that feel increasingly natural, increasingly obvious, and increasingly aligned with the inner truth you continue to inhabit without needing to finalize, conclude, or declare anything complete. And as this inner truth becomes more familiar, you begin to recognize how little effort was ever required. What once felt like striving now feels unnecessary, even strange. You see that effort was only the mind's attempt to compensate for uncertainty. When certainty is present, action becomes simple, almost incidental. You do what feels natural, and what feels natural is always aligned with the state you occupy. You start to trust yourself in a deeper way. Not the surface-level confidence that comes from past success, but a quieter trust rooted in self-recognition. You recognize that you are not at the mercy of moods, opinions, or circumstances. You are the one choosing the lens through which everything is interpreted. This recognition changes the quality of your attention. It becomes deliberate rather than reactive. The need to control outcomes fades. Control was never power, it was fear dressed as management. True power lies in assumption, in deciding what is true and allowing life to echo it back. When control drops away, life feels less resistant. Situations resolve themselves, with fewer obstacles, not because you manipulated them, but because you are no longer contradicting your own decision internally. You may find that patience arises on its own, not the patience of endurance, but the patience of expectancy. Expectancy does not wait anxiously, it rests, it knows, it allows. This patience is not passive, it is grounded. It is the calm of someone who has already settled the matter within. As this settles, the inner world becomes less crowded. Thoughts simplify, inner conversations become shorter, clearer, more decisive. You no longer rehearse explanations or arguments in your mind. You no longer revisit old outcomes searching for meaning. The past loosens its grip because it no longer defines you. The future feels closer, not in time, but in familiarity. There is also a subtle shift in how you relate to others. You stop needing them to validate your direction. Approval becomes pleasant but unnecessary. Disapproval becomes irrelevant. This is not indifference born of ego, but stability born of self-alignment. When you are aligned, you are unshaken. You begin to notice how often reality mirrors your quiet expectations. Small confirmations appear, not as signs to chase, but as reflections you recognize and move past without attachment. You understand that these are not rewards, but echoes, and because they are echoes, you do not cling to them. You remain faithful to the source. Even challenges take on a different tone. They no longer feel like obstacles, but adjustments. Life seems to be recalibrating around your assumption, removing what no longer fits, rearranging what does. What once felt like resistance now feels like reorganization. You are no longer asking, will this work? That question belonged to the old state. The new state asks only, am I remaining true to what I decided? And the answer to that question determines everything. This is how the inner world gradually becomes the dominant reality, not through force, not through repetition, not through emotional intensity, but through quiet consistency, through remaining where you have decided to be inwardly, while allowing the outer world to catch up in its own time, its own way, continuing to move, adjust, and reflect the decision you continue to live from without sealing it into an ending or resolving it into a final statement. And so it comes back to this simple final truth: nothing changes until you decide. And once you decide, everything is already changing. The power was never outside you, never delayed by time, never blocked by circumstance. It was always waiting for your inner consent. When you decide it is yours, you stop negotiating with life and start cooperating with it. You stop standing at the door of possibility and step inside. From that moment, reality does not need to be forced, persuaded, or chased. It reorganizes itself naturally around the state you have chosen to live from.